Hi, once again, this is Chris Steele from Fun Infused Games. I had originally planned to do my next video kind of talking about Hypership and some of the design decisions I was making, but I ran into a really sort of odd thing tonight with abduction action. I thought people might kind of want to hear about it because it's one of, if not the strangest bugs that I think I've ever ran into. So for a little backstory, I'm releasing Xbox or a port of my Xbox Live indie game Abduction Action on the Ouya. I submitted it for review like 4 or 5 days ago. Everything seemed to be working right on my end. In order to test it, I was running the game out of Xamarin Studio. That would deploy it to the Ouya, and then I could play from there. I could also, after deploying it, go to the play menu on the Ouya and load the application from there. So the game worked completely fine using those two ways. So I had no inclination that it was not going to work once I built out the package and sent that over to be reviewed. But I found out like 3 days after I submitted the package, they were telling me that it was crashing on startup of the game, which seemed really bizarre. And I started testing some different kind of crazy things, like loading the application, exiting out, loading back. I noticed some weird behavior with this, like in Abduction Action, like initially a loading menu comes up and the music doesn't start until like the very end of the loading. And I started noticing when I was going like back and forth from like the desktop of the Ouya back into the game, that the music would actually, on the second, third subsequent starts, it would actually be playing during the loading screen, whereas it shouldn't have been, and then when it would hit the end of the loading screen, it would stop and then start over from the beginning. So I thought maybe that they were doing something like weird like that and somehow causing an error. So I moved around all my loading stuff into a background thread, which I didn't have it before, because it wasn't really that long of a load process. I didn't think it would be worth sort of the effort of moving it and, you know, having an animated loading screen, all that, because it was done so quickly. But I moved that around hoping to resolve this problem. I was unable to recreate the problem, but I just sort of crossed my fingers because really all I had to go on was a "hey, it crashed" report. So I submitted that, and then I found out like a day later that they're still having the exact same problem. So I just asked for more clarification to try to find out if there was something like out of the ordinary they were doing to cause this, and it turns out there wasn't. But what I discovered is they were sideloading, is what they call it, the install. Basically, they're taking the file I created. It's a .apk file, and they're use like a file manager to copy it to the Ouya to install it and run it from there. So I did that same process that they did, and now I started to see the same crash that they were seeing. And I spent probably like 2 nights trying to locate exactly where this was, because I can't attach a debugger. I discovered a way to run like from a command prompt a like tracing application, so I could see like the console.write line like output to the screen, which I previously could not. And that led me to see that the problem was in one of the constructors for the enemies. When I load up the enemies, I was loading like a font resource and a bunch of textures for each enemy, and it was throwing a null reference exception whenever it tried to load any of this content, which is really strange because it does not do that when I deploy it from Xamarin Studio. And I did like a check on it uses a content manager class to load those, and that wasn't null either. And as far as I could tell, like all the class or all the resource files were there. Like everything seemed to be there. It was just bizarre, and I spent several hours like banging my head trying to figure out what was going on. And I ended up putting like a try catch around like the first instance. I think I was trying to get, hoping that there might be a more specific error message than what I was getting from some of the logging. And I discovered something odd. It was failing that first time that it would try to load the resource, but then when it tried to load it the second time, it succeeded. So it would fail on that first one that I had to try catch on, and then it would be fine, everyone going forward. So I couldn't figure any way out to make it not fail that first time when it was trying to load my enemies class. So I end up taking just like a fake object and saying, hey, load this. I don't care if it fails because I don't use this object. And then once that object failed, I could load everything else correctly. It's absolutely, completely a hackish fix. I'm not proud of it, but quite frankly, I don't know any other way to make this work. I've spent the last 3 days on this. It works. I've submitted it for review again. Hopefully it works, and it's just something for you to look out for if you're doing Ouya development, or maybe just a funny story. But it's crazy, it's interesting, and hopefully next time I will talk about something a little bit more meaningful. Alright, take care. Good night.